Headset bearings, they're one of the most overlooked components of our bikes, and everyone seems to expect them to last forever, yet no one ever services them or even gives them a second thought. So in this video, I'm going to explain how to service them, also explain the harsh realities of having modern bikes with internally routed cables and hoses, and also tell you about headset bearings which should last much longer. So these are the bearings that I've taken out of my retro Trek, and to be honest, they're maybe seen better days. They're starting to sound and feel kind of rough. Yeah, not great, but I'm hoping that by cleaning these all out and putting some fresh grease inside, we can get some extra life out of them, which is great news because it means less parts going into the bin. Now, servicing the bearings before they kind of get to this stage is really the most important thing to do here, because once they do start to feel and sound rough, this is mostly because of irreparable damage that has been done to the surface of the individual balls inside the bearing, but also on the race itself. How regularly you should need to do this? Well, it's kind of going to vary and is nearly impossible to say, but it's the kind of thing you should consider doing on an annual basis so that you're in the service territory rather than the replacement territory. Unfortunately, when your bike is running perfectly sweet and everything's running super slick, taking it to pieces to service your headset bearings is probably the last thing you're thinking of. Now, if you have a bike which has got externally routed cables and hoses, thankfully, servicing your headset bearings is actually a super easy job that nearly everybody could do at home with simple tools and equipment that most people have. Unfortunately, if you have a bike with internally routed cables and hoses, like lots of modern bikes have, well, things start to get a little bit more complicated. And unfortunately, the harsh reality here is that the extra time, effort, tools, and knowledge means that most people are probably just going to leave everything alone until things have got pretty bad, and then you're going to have to go to the bike shop and get probably about £100 repair bill to get everything sorted and running sweet again. But save that thought for later in this video, because that is when I'm going to dive into cost versus longevity across different bearing options. Anyway, headset bearings do have a pretty tough job on their hands, and that's for a number of different reasons. Firstly is during their normal use, they never actually fully rotate. They just regularly turn on a small area, which increases the wear across a small area of the bearing rather than the full thing. Plus the fact when you're riding along in bad conditions where they're constantly blasted with water and grit that sprays up off of your front wheel. And then there's the case when you wash your bike, it gets wet again, and it's actually incredibly difficult to dry headset bearings correctly because they're buried deep inside your bike, which essentially makes it the perfect breeding ground for corrosion. Thankfully though, as I mentioned, if your bike has externally routed cables and hoses, it's actually a pretty simple job to take it all apart, clean it and service it. So let me show you how. First, remove your front wheel, then remove the stem or handlebars with hex or Torx keys. Once the stem is off the bike, the forks can be lowered out. The lower bearing will be here or up here in the frame, and the upper bearing will be sat here in the top of the frame. Remove the parts off the bike, making sure not to mix up the bearings, as some have different upper and lower bearings, and then take note which way they fit onto the bike, because they have an angled surface, and also remember the order that you remove the parts, because otherwise they'll get mixed up. First, carefully remove the seals with a blade or pick, but take care not to damage or bend them. Clean out the old grease and grime with degreaser or alcohol. Dry and clean everything out. Pack in good quality grease, and within reason, the thicker the better. Refit the seals carefully, and away you go. Now, it really isn't all that complicated. The trickiest part of the whole thing is taking the seals out and putting them back in without bending or damaging them, because if you do that, well, your bearings are only going to last 10 minutes because the dirt and grease is going to get back in there. Anyway, when it comes to refitting your bike back together, it's simply a case of reversing the process. But before you do that, what you want to do is give everything a little wipe to make sure it's clean. Mostly the points where the bearings contact the frame and the fork. So wipe this upper, wipe the lower one to get a little grease out, and then wipe down here on the bottom of the fork and on the steerer. And then what we do want to do is get a little bit of grease and apply a thin film where the bearing contacts all of these little surfaces. So with everything back together, one of the last things we need to do is apply a little bit of preload onto the headset bearings to take out any play in the system, like so. And then straighten up and torque up our handlebars, which on this bike, the stem attached to the steering bolt is 5 Newton meters. So what about those bikes with fully integrated cables and hoses that I mentioned earlier? Well, as I said, chances are because of the time, the extra tools and the complexity involved, well, most people are just going to leave everything until it needs replacing and then go to your local bike shop. It's going to cost you anywhere from £100 to £150 to get the job done. That's parts and labour, which is a lot, especially when you consider some modern bikes, the headset bearings might only last, say, a year. Could even be less in particularly tough and gritty conditions, which you can see things start to add up quite quickly. But there are other options and alternatives out here. And when you go to the bike shop, you're going to be faced with an important question. Do you choose the cheaper standard headset bearings, or do you go for something like this, which is at the more premium end, but designed to last much, much longer? These exact ones are from Ceramic Speed, and it uses something called SLT technology, which stands for Solid Lubrication Technology. Now, these exact bearings are from Ceramic Speed, who really helped to bring this technology to bicycle bearings all the way back in 2018. Now, in their testing of headset bearings, they found your standard set on their test machine would last around 600,000 cycles until the bearing was worn out. However, their SLT bearings in their test conditions did 1,800,000 cycles on the test machine, but still showed no signs of wear. So just to reiterate, that's 3 times longer and still no wear. Sounds pretty incredible to me. This solid lubrication technology works by filling all the area inside the bearing, which means there's no space for dirt to get in. And then this polymer has tiny little microscopic pores in it, which self-lubricate the individual balls, which sounds amazing, but understandably, this tech is expensive. You're looking at well over £200 for a set of these headset bearings, but when you consider they're going to last much, much longer, you can start to see there's going to be a bit of a trade-off versus paying for all the extra parts and the labour over time. Now, in most cases, it's going to take the amount of time that you would have got through 2 to 3 headset bearings for everything to start to balance out, which in my mind is a really good thing because it means less parts going into the bin and more time for you to ride your bike. But understandably, you need to decide if the extra cost is right for you and the conditions that you tend to ride in. Now, the exact bearings that are tucked away in this box here are for Dan's gravel bike, because it's not actually long until he takes on the Gravel World Championships. And as a little treat, I told him I was going to trick out his bike with some pretty cool parts. So these are one of the things that I'm going to be fitting to his bike. So there you go. Hopefully that has been informative and helpful so you can find out more about headset bearings like this and how to make the headset bearings in your bike last a little bit longer. But I am keen to hear your thoughts on this, so please do get involved in the comments section down below and let me know if you're someone who would rather have the cheaper option and just keep replacing headset bearings, or you would consider going for the more expensive option that should last much, much, much longer. And as always, if you want to help support our channel, please hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe and turn on your notifications. Right, I'm out of here to tidy this mess all up. See you later.